Well, today we're talking with David Panter, Chief Executive of ECH, a major ageing care organisation in South Australia. So thank you, David, for making the time available for this. You're a CEO of a major successful organisation here in Adelaide. You're on a number of relevant boards in this space as well. And you were invited by the Royal Commission into aged care to contribute your ideas for the future. What do you see as the future direction for aged care in Australia now that report's come out?
I think that the Royal Commission's final report is absolutely spot on in, first of all, identifying we need a human rights approach in a new Aged Care Act to underpin the system going forward, but more importantly, that real focus on the home. And the home is the first port of call, recognising that I think in their figures, 85% of people ideally would like to stay living at home until death. We currently in Australia have the lowest rate in the developed world for that being achieved. For people over 70, it's about 10%.
Oh wow, that's sad.
So we've got a long way to go.
Yes.
So I think they're spot on in identifying home as being the main focus in the future for an aged care service. It's not to say that residential aged care isn't an important component. It's simply that we have, by comparison, too much focus on that in our current policy framework and system compared to home care.
Okay, so out of that report, what do you think are the non-negotiables, something that needs to be really delivered?
I think first and foremost that human rights approach. I think what the Commission doesn't articulate directly, but is inherent within what its recommendations, is recognising the inherent ageism within our society and within our systems. All too often we see people as they age being infantilised. We take away their responsibility, their ability to make decisions, way beyond what we should be doing. And even for people living with dementia, we find that for many of those individuals, they're quite capable of controlling their lives, given the right environment and the right circumstances. Yes, there's always going to be a group for which that has become beyond them, and we need to make sure that they have safe and appropriate care. But again, we're too early to judge. And we move people around, we take away the decision making, we take away their ability to live with risk. And so that human rights approach in the Royal Commission for me is a non-negotiable. That has to be embodied within the new Aged Care Act. And if we don't do that, if the government don't accept that, then it'll be another failure of older Australians.
Yes. Okay. This obviously requires leadership. So what do you think that investment must be, and what the key elements of leadership is going forward?
I think first and foremost we do have to acknowledge that leadership is critical. That in running an organisation, particularly an organisation providing support and care, the culture is so critical to its success in terms of the outcomes achieved for those older people using the services. And that culture is created by the leadership. It only takes the wrong action, the wrong word by the leader or leaders to undermine all the good intent. I've sort of, one of my first learnings in my very first chief exec job was the importance of, if I really wanted the culture of an organisation to be of a particular manner and focus, I had to model that myself. No matter whether I said I could say that I supported that, but unless I actually modelled the behaviour, it didn't give the rest of the organisation permission to realise that it was authentic and they could do that as well. So leadership is critical, and I find at the moment in the discussions around the Royal Commission, the area that's not getting addressed is the area of key dispute between the two commissioners. And that is not about what we're trying to do, but the how. With one commissioner saying that the existing Department of Health and Ageing its culture can be changed to deliver what's required to deliver the recommendations, and the other commissioner saying, no, we actually need a separate new body, a new commission that's still accountable to Parliament but is independent of the bureaucratic culture if we really want to get the change. And yet we don't seem to be having any debate about those two models at the moment. I think people have just assumed, well, the government will just go with the existing department because that's the easy option, and I think personally they probably will as well. But we should be having a debate within the sector about what is it that is required to bring about the cultural transformation that we need, and where does leadership fit within that?
Yeah.
And can that be achieved in a government agency where almost by default leaders change every 18 months to 2 years, when we're talking about a 10-year transformation program?
Yeah.
So looking at the evidence base around leadership, its role in delivering outcomes, delivering, in our case, benefits to older Australians, we've got to have that debate. It is critical. None of this will succeed without us getting that bit right, in my view.
Yes, absolutely. Can we just switch now to ECH? You've got a specific focus as an organisation, a point of difference, and you've done quite a lot to drive change here as well, so not only building and changing the culture, but what is unique about ECH in terms of its business model, and what drives success in the future for ECH that you want to get to?
So absolutely, ECH has been on a significant transformation journey of our own.
Yes.
And that came about through, again, good, clear leadership from the board 6 or 7 years ago that made the decision to divest from residential aged care. At that point, we had 11 residential aged care facilities, 1,200 licensed beds. We were the biggest provider of residential aged care in South Australia at that point, as well as doing the other things that aged care providers do, and for us, including retirement villages and housing for independent living. But they made that big, bold decision to divest of residential. I was then given the absolute privilege to be recruited as the chief exec with a mandate to drive the transformation. And that freeing ourselves up from residential has enabled us to put a real spotlight on how to enable us to support people to live independently at home. What are the types of activities, services, supports? And so part of our journey has been, again, appreciating, we sort of see anybody who leaves our home care service to go to residential as a failure on our part. And we do undertake a bit of a sort of root cause analysis to try and understand why that happened when the person ideally didn't want that to happen. And is there something we could have done differently? Is there a new service? Is there an innovation we could make? Could we behave differently? And through that, we've been able to identify new services, new opportunities to get that better outcome for the older people that we're serving. And so that's been, and we're still on that journey. And we're very open, we've been very keen to look at both service changes but also technology. And we've invested in technology, acquired technology businesses where we think that's really going to add some value to our core purpose.
Yeah. And what sort of technology have you invested in so far?
So, in particular, the technology we're interested in is the technology that helps us to predict and therefore intervene and prevent decline and deterioration. So Billy, our home monitoring system, uses a handful of motion sensors that we put into somebody's home. Within a week, the system develops an understanding of their baseline behaviour, and then we look to changes to that baseline. And a really good example, it's really simple, easy to understand, is toilet behaviour. So if somebody normally goes to the toilet 10 times a day and it starts to increase, that is the best indication we've got that there's a potential urinary tract infection.
Yes.
We know that unchecked urinary tract infections are one of the most commonest causes of falls, because the infection grows, you get dizzy, you fall.
Yeah.
So if we can intervene to check for a UTI as soon as we see the toilet behaviour changing, then that's a step forward for us. That's what I mean about being preventative, being predictive.
Yes.
So we're really interested in that sort of technology, rather than other more sort of intrusive types of technology. Although I have to say, in our latest development, which is our care hotel, which is providing services to people, respite services to people living with dementia, we're using state-of-the-art facial recognition systems to avoid locking doors.
Okay.
Because we think locks and keys just send the wrong message, and we're creating a hotel environment, but we've got to provide a safe environment, and the facial recognition technology we're working with gives us that assurance. So it actually lets people in and out of doors if their face matches. It doesn't.
Of course.
So it's, again, an interesting way of using some very standard technology, but to improve the experience of somebody.
Yeah. Did you have to make a lot of workforce changes, or do a lot of retraining and development of?
It's really been about growing and developing our workforce as we've moved forward, and as we've learned more about what we need to do, how that loops back into the training and support that we give to our staff. We're very fortunate that I think because of our approach, because of our culture, we have, I think, one of the lowest attrition rates in terms of staff. We're currently travelling at sort of just under 10%, compared to about a 22-23% industry average. So we know that from the feedback we get that staff like working for us. And again, our bit of innovation around that is we're now using a thing called the Care Friends app, which enables our staff to recommend their friends and family members the jobs that we've got, because we've found we get much better quality of staff and much better retention when we recruit through our existing staff rather than by direct advertising.
That's good.
And that Care Friends app just makes that process a lot simpler, and our staff get points, and those points can get traded in for cash.
Well, and if they're recommending staff, they're also talking, family for roles. They're actually talking to the quality of the culture that they'd be coming into, because they're part of it.
That's right. Well, and that's how Care Friends app works. It's based on the evidence that essentially, if you like working for us, it's very likely that your family members and friends, who will often share the same values and outlooks, will also enjoy working for us.
Yeah, of course.
So it works on that basis.
Yes.
And we're getting some really good results from that now.
Yeah. So how do your clients give you feedback?
So we have a multiple or variety of ways in which they do that. We obviously have sort of standard sort of compliments, complaint stuff, but we also do quite extensive surveys, and everything that we do in terms of our innovation and development is based upon co-design principles. And so clients are involved with us in anything that we're developing. We have a lived experience reference group, so we have about 30 volunteers, and they may be people directly receiving our services, they may be family members of people receiving our services. That group meets on every 6 weeks. I attend, it's chaired by them, it's run by them. We will often put workshop topics to them in order to help us think about how we should be developing and still be relevant and appropriate for what our service users are looking for. So from co-design through to surveys, through to traditional complaints, we have a myriad of ways in which those that we're here for, our older Australians that we're providing the service to, have a direct input into what we do.
Right, that's fantastic. What haven't I asked, David, or you'd like to say in addition in terms of the Royal Commission or in terms of ECH?
I think in terms of a key factor for me, which cuts across leadership, the Royal Commission, what we're doing at ECH, is also about embracing diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I applaud the Royal Commission for the fact that they've focused in their hearings on diversity in its different forms. There are a number of recommendations, both in relation to First Australians, but also into broader diversity within the community, be that LGBTI, be it cold communities, etc. They're recognised, and it's important that organisations providing services to older Australians recognise that diversity, and that then has to be reflected in the culture and the leadership of the organisation.
Yeah.
So diversity is absolutely paramount, I think, as an ingredient, and we're recognising it's successfully now implementing what the Royal Commission is saying we need to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for doing this interview. It's enlightening, but it's been so enjoyable just talking to you. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.